One of the big things people don't realise is that for pretty much every museum, what you see is a tiny fraction of the collection. The statistic is something like 90% of a museum's collection is in store and isn't seen by the public. But that all needs to be cared for as well. At People's History Museum, we've got over 60,000 objects on display in our store. We focus on the development of democracy in the UK, as well as the use of protest and activism to advocate for a better and fairer world. I look after all the objects. I ensure that they're cared for correctly, documented correctly, because we need to record the stories connected to the objects. It's no good having an object and knowing nothing about it, not knowing who owned it, who used it. Often people approach us and say, would you like this particular object or objects? Sometimes we approach people and ask them to donate an object.
We also do responsive collecting during Black Lives Matter protests. When people were going out with the placards, we would have staff who would say, hi, would you be willing to donate this? That also is true of the climate emergency. We collect from school strikes, things like that. So often, people who don't have experience of history and heritage as a sector assume that history is telling the stories of kings and parliaments. And it is that, but it is also telling the stories of everyday people who lived during these times, how global events impacted people's lives.
I love the way you can use an object to talk about much bigger things. Diaries or leaflets or badges or posters, they're all, as important as a Prime Minister's ministerial box or their jacket or anything like that.
The object that caught my eye the most was the Mark Ashton AIDS Trust banner. It's been used at protests, so it's got stickers around the edges that are showing it that it had a life, this object. It wasn't just it was made and then it was put away. People used it, people cared about it, and were proud of it. Sometimes I'll go into the off-site stores and I'll come across an object that I don't know a lot about, and then I'll look it up and it'll just have this incredible story behind it. A little while ago I was looking for an object for display, and I opened a box relating to a World War I soldier who had been involved in the peace movement. One of the things that he had donated to our archive was grass that he took from one of the battlefields during World War I. And we have that. And being able to share that story and go and edit the digital record to make sure that that story was told the way that he had told it to us when he donated it. That's one of my favourite things about my job, is being able to make sure that people's stories are told the way that they wanted them to be.
My favourite part is thinking about how I can use the objects in our collection to tell stories about the campaign for democracy in the UK, the protests and the activism that has gone on in the last 200 years in the UK, and how successful many of those campaigns have been, and the world that we are in now being an infinitely better one than it was 200 years ago. I love unlocking those stories and finding out about the people and the events connected to those objects.
All of these things are part of our society's history, and through seeing them and being able to interact with them and study them, we're able to understand ourselves better. We're able to share these stories with the public.
Without museums and without archives working to preserve that material, much of it would be lost.